Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another segment of It's Getting Real. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as it helps me get in the algorithm. Today we're going to discuss a case that shook Australia. Not only did it raise questions about the legal system, but it created discussions about family violence and mental health and how law enforcement and other officials handle it. Luke Batty was born on June 20th, 2002, to Rosie Batty and Greg Anderson. His parents were off and on for a couple of years, having started their relationship as early as 1992 when they met while working together at a recruitment company. Now, she saw red flags, but she saw potential as well. And because of the potential that she saw, she excused some of the red flags. I don't know why we do that. When a person shows you who they are, believe them. But she saw signs like Greg drinking too much, and that he was easily angered, and that he was often inappropriate with coworkers and friends, that he didn't want to be exclusive, that she found herself doubting herself because he would always do this push and pull thing with her, where when she wanted him, he didn't want her, and when she didn't want him, he wanted her. Very juvenile like, if you ask me. So at some point she decides, look, I don't need this, I'm leaving you. And she leaves because she's tired of the back and forth and of him not wanting to be committed. So she leaves only to come back to him 8 years later, all because their paths crossed due to a mutual friend. Now, you would think that she, having gone through the things that she went through with him prior, would leave him alone, but she didn't. She gives him another chance. They meet up, they have great conversation, and despite his previous actions, despite at that point him not having his own place or a steady form of income or healthy relationships with others, she gets back with him. And he does what a lot of men like him do, which is he becomes a leech. And he slowly but surely works his way back into her life and then eventually into her home. So now Rosie is in her late 30s and she finds out she's pregnant. Greg wasted no time to let her know this isn't what he wanted. He wasn't excited at all. And to be fair, she wasn't excited either because she had lost her mother at a young age. Most of her family was in the UK, and she often feared losing people that she cared about most. But that all changed when she met her beautiful baby boy, Luke. Luke was her gift. He was a good baby. He was described as bright and handsome, sensitive at times, but happy and energetic and loving and talkative, and a compassionate child with a deep love for sports, later making cricket his real love. Now, he was described by teachers as all those things, as long with being kind of a chatterbox at school. He was a good student, but he would get in trouble because of his excessive talking. I mean, that happened to me before. So I get it. Believe it or not, I got notes sent home because I ran my mouth too much. That was in like second and third grade. But the point is, I got some notes too, as did he. In the beginning of his birth, Greg chose to be an absent parent. He was not at Luke's birth and he really wasn't involved. When Luke was born, Greg was actually staying at a Russian Orthodox monastery in New South Wales. And he was banned from there because he was making abusive phone calls to them, which made him return to Rosie and Luke shortly after. So he attempts not only to be in Luke's life, but he figures he might as well be in Rosie's as well. But Greg had problems, and his anger was a huge one. There are some reports that say that Rosie had Luke via cesarean, and shortly after the birth of her son, while she was still healing from that Greg assaulted her. Now, the type of assault, I'm not sure, because there were instances where she said he just roughed her up by pulling her hair and things of that nature. You saying he just roughed me up makes me feel like you're minimizing it. The point is, he assaulted her in some capacity, right? So she, at that point, was like, I'm done. She's smart enough to leave the relationship, but he's still given access to her son. When it comes to abuse, this is just my feelings, you all tell me yours, but I feel like these type of individuals should be cut completely out of children's lives. Because if you're willing to say and do and hurt me, then that means there's a chance, it may be slim, but even if it's slim, it's enough for me to be concerned. There's a chance that you may want to do something to my child too, because my child is an extension of me. And if you can't get to me, what are you going to try to do? What? Get to my child. Growing up, Luke witnessed multiple altercations between his parents. They separated when he was young, but Greg was an ongoing problem for his mom, with Greg at some point later in life going as far as saying that he would kill Rosie if she ever tried to keep him away from his son. So after that statement is made, it's the next day, Rosie decides she's going to file a protective order against him. She gets it, but she doesn't get it for her and her son. She gets it just for herself. Despite her efforts, the legal system allows Greg visitation rights, which ultimately led to the tragic events of February 12, 2014. We'll get to it. Because according to the law, his anger was never directed towards Luke. He was allowed to continue to see him. So she eventually runs out of time on that order. It expires, and she doesn't renew it because he stopped bothering her momentarily. At some point, she has a roommate living with her. He happens to be a man, and that causes him trying to get back in the home once again. So time passes, and off and on, Greg tries and he fails. He makes one last attempt in 2013 to rekindle things. At that time, as usual, he's not working. He had no place to stay, and he was living in his car. He thought, if I go to Rosie and I tell Rosie all these things and she knows that I have a child with her, that Rosie will allow me to stay at her place. But she did not. He got upset, and he decides that he's going to take his happy tail and break into her apartment. Not only does he break into the apartment, but he chases her, later assaulting her while Luke is standing by, hearing it and seeing it for himself. He's witnessing his father attacking his mother. That alone is horrible, is tragic. Rosie describes Luke as a very sensitive child and says that there was a lot of times where he would cry and things of that nature, and she would tell him it was okay to cry. So I can imagine how torn up he was in witnessing his father attack his mom. So this time, because of that attack, Greg is arrested, and he's questioned by authorities. So it's January 4th. 2013, and there's footage of him sitting on the floor with his arms crossed, facing the wall at the police station in Hastings, southeast of Melbourne, saying, I only answer to Jesus. I want to know why you think you got the right to hold me at all. This is what he's saying to detectives and officers. He had been arrested for threatening to kill Rosie, and for breaching an order that he wasn't supposed to come into her home without permission. But he's sitting there saying statements like what I told you, refusing to answer questions of police. And guess what they do, y'all? After all that, he's later released on bail. Where he got that money from, considering he has no job, I don't know. But he's released on bail. As a result of all this, another order is put in place. But once again, it does not mention Luke. I don't understand why it's not understood that abusers have no morals. That man doesn't care about anyone at this point but himself. And I personally wouldn't trust it. So Greg is allowed to see Luke with no type of protection for Luke. Luke at the time is now 10, and Greg starts getting angrier and angrier. And instead of taking that anger out on Rosie, he begins to take it out on Luke. It gets directed towards Luke, to the point where there's an instance while in the vehicle that Greg pulls out a knife, shows it to Luke, threatens Luke, saying it could all end like this, as he holds the knife in his hand. This incident causes Rosie to forbid, as she should, this man from seeing her child or contacting them. She didn't know it at the time, but the man has a really, really dark past. But Australian privacy laws prevent her from knowing many things about him. Even when she filed for various restraining orders or protective orders, she couldn't find out. It seems like this happens everywhere. It's definitely not just an Australian thing. We've seen it in the UK. We've seen it over here in the USA. Like it's a thing in a lot of places where these people who commit these crimes are given rights that, in my opinion, none of them should have. So let's jump to July 2013. Greg is challenging the court because of the order that prevents him from having contact with his son. And guess what happens, y'all? He wins. It's dropped. And the judge says he's allowed to spend time with Luke as long as they're in public places. I personally can't comprehend it. You know that a year prior, this man threatened well, not even a year, months prior, this man threatened this boy by holding up a knife and telling him like it can all end here. And yet, even though he did that, your answer is it's okay for him to be around him. It's okay as long as they're in a public place. Rosie and others feel like this was a safe compromise. Rosie believed he was in a homeless situation for many years. His life was failing. Everything was becoming worse in his life, and Luke was his only bright light. So if that could help him, then so be it. But it's not Luke's job to be his father's bright light. I don't like that that's put upon a child. So we jump to February 12th, 2014, in the suburb of Tyab. I'm probably saying it right. Wrong. Tyabb, Victoria, Australia. Y'all, my folks from Australia, help me out. I know I pronounced it wrong. I'm sorry for butchering it. It's unintentional, but I can't remember the way it was pronounced. Luke is at cricket practice when his father shows up. Now, accounts vary as to Greg's behavior during that day. Some say that he played the role of a typical supportive father, encouraging their son as he played his sport that he loved, while others say that Greg looked a little agitated. His mother is there, and Greg is there. And at one point during the practice, Greg takes Luke over near the cricket nets so they could do some little drills back and forth, or they could have a little conversation. Rosie notices this and tries to tell Luke, like, yeah, come on, son, let's go. We don't have time for all that, son. Let's go. But he doesn't get to see his father often. And like many kids his age, at that time he was 11, he wants to spend time with his father. And so what he does is he says, Mom, can I please have a little bit more time with Dad? Can I please have a little bit more time with him? So she grants his wish because she's thinking we're in a public place. He's not going to do anything to us. There's parents around here with their kids. He's going to leave us be. So Rosie turns her back. I'm not sure if she was having a conversation or what, but she turns her back and she hears what she describes as a disturbing sound. She turns around to see her son's lifeless body on the ground and Greg hovering over him. She's thinking, oh my goodness, his dad accidentally hit him in the head with the cricket bat. I got to hurry up and get over there. But that wasn't the case, you guys. Luke is laying down on the ground. His father is over him. One of the coaches come over to help, And he says to him, he's fine. He's in heaven now. What the hell do you mean he's fine? If my child collapses on the ground, whether I think he's dead or alive, I'm going to be doing everything in my power to save my child. I'm not going to turn around and say, my child is okay, my child is in heaven. No, I'm going to be screaming. I'm going to be crying. Somebody dial 999, 911, 000, whatever the number is for where you're at. Dial emergency services now so we can get somebody out here to save my baby. That would be, I might be running to the car myself with my baby, depending on if I think that he can be moved or not. But I would not be sitting there talking about it's okay, he's in heaven now. Young children who witnessed this later tell police that they saw Greg intentionally hit Luke in the head with the cricket bat over and over again. And then he pulled out a knife and he stabbed him. He did this with children as young as 8, families standing around, because he's safe in public, right? It's okay for him to be in public. This is his child that he did this to. Why? Because he's sick and he wanted to hurt his son's mother. So police and paramedics arrive on the scene, and Greg will not let them get near Luke. He is swinging his knife, and as they approach, he ends up stabbing himself with the same knife that he used to stab his son. He's resisting arrest. Police are trying to get him under control. They spray him with spray, and he is not calming down. And as he's lunging at the officers with the knife, he's shot. He's later transported to the hospital where he dies, ultimately resulting in not just his son being gone, but Greg being gone as well. No justice whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. At the time that Greg killed Luke, police had 4 arrest warrants in his name. 4 of them, you guys. And several what they call as intervention orders, including one to protect Luke and his mother, Rosemary, or Rosie as we call her, Batty. But she wasn't told about any of those arrest warrants or an intervention order that was taken out against him by someone that at some point he stayed with. So the ball was dropped, because even if y'all couldn't find him, you knew where she lived, and nobody reached out to her to make her aware of the situation. The day after his death, she makes a statement that I cannot understand and I can't fathom, and I'm going to try not to judge her on it, but I just can't see myself, after you unalive my child, saying something like, no one loved Luke more than I and his father. I would beg to differ. I would beg to think that anyone who sits there and I understand that there are some things that happen mentally, but this wasn't a oopsie. This was a calculated situation where he went out and he bought the knife to this game, this practice, pulled him over to the side away from his mom, hit him with the bat, stabbed him, like he did multiple things to get this scenario to play out. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't unintentional. So in my mind, I'm not going to use his whatever supposed alleged mental problems that he had. I'm not. She said what triggered this was a case of his dad having mental health issues. He was in a homeless situation for many years. His life was failing and everything was becoming worse in his life. And Luke was his only bright light. I'm saying that again because put that into context. You're saying that Luke was his only bright light, but look what he did to Luke. If he's the bright light, why are we destroying that light? Dr. Chris Adamore, a senior policy advisor and domestic violence expert, said, Greg is central to this entire thing, but no one ever got a proper picture of him. Now he's deceased, of course, but when he was alive, there were various failures to locate him because he was homeless and transient. It also is because, as far as we're aware, he had no ongoing contact with health services and never sought help for his anger and mental health issues. Magistrates in only select Victorian courts had the power to order perpetrators to undergo counseling and anger management. I don't know what that situation is. I don't understand why that shouldn't be an automatic thing, no matter what position you hold as a magistrate, but that's beyond my understanding. If you know, put it down below. That just seems to reinforce a system that acts so much of the victims and not the perpetrators. It does. We talk about family violence perpetrators slipping through the net. And in this case, there were huge holes in that net through which Greg seemed to be able to come and go of free will. Why? Why is it that this man, who was in constant contact at times towards the end with his son, was never located? Why is it that he could get in contact with her? He could pop up at her house. He could do all these things, but the police couldn't find him to serve the warrant and arrest him. The murder of Luke Batty prompted an outpouring of grief and anger across Australia. His mother, Rosie, became a prominent advocate for victims of domestic violence. She has since worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the dangers of family violence and to push for reforms in the legal system to better protect children and their custodial parents. Luke's death also led to several inquiries and reviews of the family court system and the way it handles cases involving domestic violence. It's a shame that it took the loss of this beautiful 11-year-old in order for this to happen. Why do things like this always have to happen in order for us to care? Rosie Batty's advocacy played a crucial role in these discussions, bringing to light the need for a more robust approach to family violence cases and better support systems for victims. The Luke Batty case raised important questions about the effectiveness of a legal system in protecting vulnerable individuals, especially children, from domestic violence. It highlighted a critical need for reforms in how courts assess the risks posed by parents with a history of violence, which is good. It's good that it did that. Fostering discussions about mental health treatment and support for individuals exhibiting violent behavior. It underscores the importance of early intervention and the need for comprehensive support systems for families experiencing DV. This is tragic, and it feels like it's incomplete because this man never came to justice. The murder of Luke is a reminder of how often DV goes undetected and how so many systems are not designed to correctly protect the vulnerable. As Australia continues to grapple with the implications of this case, in my opinion, serves as a call to action for all lawmakers, mental health professionals, and society as a whole to prioritize the safety and the well-being of children. I'm not saying that we all don't matter. DV affects more than just children. It affects women, it affects men, it affects everyone involved. But I think that it's important to think about the kids more, because you think just because the child isn't being harmed in that moment that they aren't being harmed here or potentially being harmed elsewhere. The legacy of Luke baddie through the advocacy of his mother remains a powerful force for change in the fight against domestic violence. I hate that because this man wasn't treated properly, because this man was given chance after chance, because the courts did not protect this child and this woman from this man, that Luke is no longer here. Who's to say what Luke could have been? It's unfortunate, and I couldn't begin to imagine. I didn't talk about it at the time, but even his mom. Imagine you hearing the last sounds of your son's life with the disturbing sound that she heard, and you turn around thinking it was an accident, only to later realize that it was a murder. You guys, let me know your thoughts on this. Luke, continue to rest in peace.